So I understand this is about 2 weeks old. This has been in the news for some time. People are done talking about it, but I'm going to resurrect it for a little bit because I do want to talk about this. And I've been gone for a week, so I haven't been able to make videos. But pretty much, to put simply, Ben Shapiro went on with Andrew Neil to promote his own book, and things didn't go so well for Ben Shapiro. And I want to talk about this just in terms of approaching interviews and interview etiquette and how this thing went, just to really dive in deep to this in depth in as quick as time as possible. I'm going to try to keep this under 20 minutes, but you can look at the timestamp now and see whether I did a good job of that or not. But a few things to keep in mind going forward that I don't think people are really keeping in mind. One, there are two different debates happening here that I've seen people talk about. One, was Ben Shapiro justified in acting the way he did, in terms of, would you say, like, yeah, he deserves to act that way? And two, does he look good? Like, does this make him look good, the way he acted? Because this is on TV. This is an interview. It's all about the impression you have on people. And those are kind of two similar but separate questions. And I think sometimes I see people debate one and the other person is debating the other, and they come into kind of a clash in that respect. We're going to go through this briefly. I'm going to include a few clips here, but if you want to watch the full interview, if you haven't already, I will leave that in the description. But I am going to include a few clips here, which hopefully YouTube doesn't take this down for copyright. I'm going to include a few clips on the parts that I think are important. So the first part is 3 minutes and 44 seconds in. Overall, it's been a fine interview. So far, Andrew Neil has yet to bring up Ben Shapiro's book in any significant way. And obviously, that's something that I'm pretty sure that when you, like, the whole point of this interview, the whole reason Ben Shapiro agreed to be on was to talk about his book, because that's what you do when you put out a new book. You go on a ton of interviews and you basically promote your book and talk to people about it. And the whole point of the interviewer is kind of to ask questions about, like, tell us about your book, tell us about the points in your book. Here's some devil's advocate positions, like, to basically have the author describe what's in the book and not give away too much information that the book is pointless, but to give enough that the person who wants to read the book. That's what this is all about. So this is with Andrew Neil and Ben Shapiro, 3 minutes and 44 seconds in. I'm just going to play this clip here, and we'll go from there.
Some of the ideas that are popular in your side of politics would seem to take us back to the Dark Ages. Georgia, new abortion laws, which you are much in favor of, that a woman who miscarries could get 30 years. A Georgian woman who travels to another state for an abortion procedure could get 10 years. These are extreme hard policies.
Well, okay, a couple of things. One, I'm not sure. I mean, frankly, I don't know whether are you an objective journalist or are you an opinion journalist?
I'm a journalist that asks questions.
Okay, so you're a supposedly objective journalist calling policies with which you disagree barbaric and suggesting only one side of the political aisle has ideas. So I just want to point out that I wish you would at least be honest in your own biases.
Mr. Shapiro, I know that broadcasting in America is now so polarized that on one program you only have the left and another one you just have the right. My job is to question those who have strong views and put an alternative to them. If you were an anti-abortion person, I would be putting pro-abortion questions to you. But you are
really would you call the pro-choice position?
So why don't you just answer my question,
sir? I'm happy to answer your question. Please answer this one. Would you suggest that a late-term abortion is brutal?
I'm not taking a view on this issue. I'm asking you the questions.
Sir, you just suggested that the pro-life position is inherently brutal and terrible, so I'm asking you, as an objective journalist, would you ask the same question to a pro-choice advocate by calling their position brutal and horrible?
What I'm asking you is that why is it that a bill banning abortions after a woman has been pregnant for 6 weeks is not a return to the Dark Ages? What's your answer?
My answer is something called science. Human life exists at conception. It ought to be protected. Now, back to my question to you. You purport to be an objective journalist. BBC purports to be an objective down-the-middle network. It obviously is not. It never has been. And you as a journalist are proceeding to call one side of the political aisle ignorant, barbaric, and sending us back to the Dark Ages. Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest? Seriously, it's a serious question.
Mr. Shapiro, if you only knew how ridiculous that statement is, you wouldn't have said it. So,
okay, so rather interesting thing here. There are a few things to note. Something I actually only noticed recently was the way that Andrew Neil asked questions. So I'm not sure if he's a bad interviewer, or I know I've probably upset people there. I don't know if he's someone that's bad at interviews, or if there's just a difference between how interviews go in the UK versus the US. I watch UK interviews, and they seem to be the same way as in the US, but apparently this might be different here, or maybe it's just Andrew Neil. I'm not sure. But generally the way questions are is it's assumed that, like, if I ask someone a question, I'm not just a robot asking, like, robotic questions. I have a personality if I'm interviewing someone. I ask questions, and generally I ask them as myself, not as someone else. If I am asking them as someone else, I will clarify that. So what I mean essentially is that if I were to play devil's advocate and reply to someone and say, well, I disagree with you, or even if I were to provide a counter argument to what someone is saying, if I agree with my own counter argument that I'm making, I will say, well, my response to that would be this, and that's what I would say. Or what about this? Like, I would say, what about, like, isn't this a return to the Dark Ages? So when I say, isn't these new abortion laws or anti-abortion laws a return to the Dark Ages, it's generally implied that that is what I believe, unless I specify otherwise. At least in the interviews that I've watched, and I watch quite a few interviews. And I've noticed when Andrew Neil says that, and Ben Shapiro says, like, you seem a bit biased here, Andrew Neil immediately goes to, well, I'm not saying what I believe, I'm just providing a counter argument. I'm just providing that. But yet, I don't know, just when I see other interviews, the way I would go about that, and it seems like the interviewers that I appreciate would go about that, is if they were to agree with Shapiro, or if they were to take a neutral position at the very least, the way they would provide a counter argument would say, well, some people on the left, or this person, or if they say this, there is a belief from other people that here's a counter argument. How would you respond to that? That's what I would say. So maybe it's just a difference in communication, or maybe it is just Andrew Neil being incredibly biased. I'm honestly not sure what his position on abortion was. I spent 2 minutes Googling. I'm not going to spend any more time than that trying to find out Andrew Neil's positions, because I don't care that much. But I couldn't find it, so I'm just saying that maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's just how he interviews people, or maybe he really is just trying to defend himself from his own bias. But when the thing that really hurt Ben Shapiro, that made him really look bad, was when he said Andrew Neil was on the left. He said, why can't you admit that you're on the left? That is if, just imagine for a second that you were listening to Rush Limbaugh, or a Sean Hannity, or an Ann Coulter, something like that, and they were interviewing someone on their show, or a Bill O'Reilly, or a Tucker Carlson. You were to listen to them interviewing someone, and the person they were interviewing got upset and said, why can't you just say you're left wing? Because as far as I don't know too much about Andrew Neil, but as far as I can tell, I went through some of his, like, credentials, policy positions where he's worked in the past. He's pretty right-wing. He's pretty much a right-wing conservative in the UK sense. Now, that's a bit different than the American sense, which is why there's a bit of a clash there. But I don't like this argument that Ben Shapiro takes, where Ben Shapiro admits later that he doesn't know much about Andrew Neil. He's never heard of him before this interview. And so far, basically, what Ben Shapiro says is, I only know how you stand on this one position, so I'm going to say you're left-wing. And I don't like that, because, like, libertarians deal with that all the time, where they say, it's like, well, I argue, and I've done that before, where I've been called a Koch brothers shill and a George Soros shill in the same comment thread on the same thing. There are times where I will take a position that is at least not a right-wing position, and people will say, like, you're a leftist, and it's like, all you know about me is this one position. Like, on this one position, I don't agree with you entirely, and because you're right-wing and you disagree with me, you assume I'm on the left. That's dumb. That's annoying. It's aggravating when people do that, and it really hurts their position, because that means, like, when people make that accusation, it shows that they think of things purely as, like, a left-right paradigm, and they don't really understand that, hey, people can take different issues on certain things. Abortion, like, there are such things as people that are incredibly right-wing on most issues, and they're pro-choice on abortion. Those people exist. I mean, there's not that many of them, but to say that someone is pro-choice, therefore on the left, if you were to make a guess, you would be right most of the time. But the problem is, that's not really something you say in an interview, because if you're wrong, it makes you look pretty bad. And in this case, Ben Shapiro was wrong. Again, it's kind of like calling Sean Hannity a leftist kind of thing. It just makes you look bad. So we're going to skip to 837 right here. Overall, I believe they just kind of keep talking about this thing. They ask a few more questions. So far, no actual mention of the book has been mentioned, or they're like Andrew Neil has yet to go into depth in what the book actually says. So we're going to go from, I said 837, this is 834, close enough. And we're going to go to 908.
Polarization of issues is part of the problem in the coarsening of public debate.
Well, maybe it's also part of your problem too, because we have from your YouTube videos, Ben Shapiro destroys the abortion argument. Ben Shapiro destroys transgenderism and abortion. Is that not a kind of coarse public discourse?
Well, are those videos labeled by me?
I have no idea. But
why are you picking out? Why are you? I have a question. Why are you picking out random YouTube videos put up by people who are not me?
Are you
and then attributing the titles to me?
Are you unhappy with the way they've been described?
So now that's interesting. This is something where Andrew Neil kind of screwed up. Because the first thing, like what he did was essentially he went to YouTube, or someone, or maybe his staff, found some YouTube videos that were about Ben Shapiro, but were not by Ben Shapiro, and basically said, why did you title them this way? Doesn't this make you a hypocrite that other people titled them this way? And Ben Shapiro called him out and said, like, these videos aren't by me. Like, why are you attributing this to me when they're not? And that was, like, Andrew Neil screwed up. Like, he is, I'm assuming he just didn't do his research, and not that he was intentionally like, oh, I know these aren't by him, but I'm going to say it anyway, because like he had to have known this would have been the response if that was the case. But yeah, basically he went to YouTube, found some videos, and we're like, oh, Ben Shapiro's in them, therefore they're by Ben Shapiro, or something like that. Which is I guess that's just old people not understand the internet. I'm not sure. I've seen people do that before, and it's moronic. Like, it makes you look terrible when you say, oh, look at this person with this video, and they're not even the one that made the video. Like, it's terrible. It makes you look bad. And now, if you'll notice, Andrew Neil tried to kind of come back from that a bit, and he realizes that he thought there was a connection here between Ben Shapiro and the videos, and there is none. So now he's trying to establish the connection with, oh, well, do you agree with the titles? So we got another 10 seconds here.
I think that people can describe me however they please. It's a free country, and I'm all in favor of a public debate. If you watch the actual clips, they are generally civil conversations between me and somebody who disagrees with me.
So, that was a good response, I thought. That Ben Shapiro saw that he was trying to establish a connection, and Ben Shapiro basically said, like, hey, people can call him whatever they want. Like, I'm not going to agree or disagree with them, because then people could say, well, you agree with all videos titled about you by Ben Shapiro, or not by Ben Shapiro, and stuff like that. So I thought that was a good response, and that was bad on Andrew Neil's part. But then, if I remember, right after this, he finally, 9 minutes and 18 seconds into this interview, he finally starts going a bit more in depth about the book. Andrew Neil finally goes a bit more in depth about the book by Ben Shapiro. And I'm not going to go through, again, if you want to watch this whole video, link is in the description, but pretty much all the questions are just character attacks. Like, the next few sections, he asks, like, well, you're talking about discourse and how the left has poisoned discourse, and, well, what about this thing you said back in 2012? What about this thing you said back in 2015? That kind of thing. And I hate these questions. These are moronic questions. If you ask someone, what is your opinion on something you said in 2012, and you don't give them, like, ahead of time, a notice ahead of time to go back and look at what they actually said, it hurts you. Because, I mean, I'll be honest, I have not said near as many things as Ben Shapiro has. He has put, I have no idea how many podcast episodes, 700, 800, I have no idea. A ton. Maybe 900 now, who knows? But a ton of different podcast episodes. And he goes on for a good hour or something like that, and he talks a lot. And he also writes a ton of articles. And, like, he just puts out all kinds of information. And to expect him to remember what he said in 2012 and to then defend it is pretty ridiculous, honestly. Because, like, anyone that's a public figure has to know. Like, they can't remember everything they say. They can't know that stuff. I mean, my own videos, if you notice, my old videos are scripted. I can't even remember what I said half the time. If you were to say, you said this back in, honestly, just a year ago, if you were to reference a video I did a year ago and say, you said this, I would need to go back and watch it. I would need to go back and look at the context. I would have remind myself of the circumstances at the time before I could fully respond and defend that. Because I really don't know half the time. Like, I don't know. You'd have to pretty much like, give me a moment to really go back and look at what I said and answer it. So I hate these questions. I think all of these questions are in bad faith. So I do think these questions here, I'm not going to include, but again, if you want to listen to them, they're in the description. But basically, they're all bad faith questions because they ask him, like, what about this thing you said in 2012? Isn't that poisoning public discourse? And he asked him a question about, I guess he called Obama's State of the Union fascist, and he called, he said, all Jews that vote for Obama aren't real Jews or something like that. Now, again, forget those statements. I'm not going to comment on them at all. All I'm going to say is it is pretty awful to expect someone to just out of the blue have be fully clear of exactly why they said that. And you can say there's no, like circumstance or there's no context that could make saying that okay. If you said that, you'd be wrong. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to defend what he said, and he's not even defending what he says. All he's just saying is, I don't know what I said back then. Like, you'd have to let me read it. You have to let me see what I said. So then we're going to skip forward to 14 minutes in towards the end where you can tell Ben Shapiro finally gets quite upset and is losing his temper.
You know, honestly, this is a giant waste of time in the sense that the entire interview is designed for you to shout slogans or old things that I've said at me. I don't see how this forwards the debate. You talk about undermining the public discourse. It seems to me that simply going through and finding lone things that sound bad out of context and then hitting people with them is a way for you to make a quick buck on BBC off the fact that I'm popular and no one has ever heard of you.
So a few things to that there. I thought this was interesting. I'm going to come out as the centrist here and neither agree nor disagree entirely with Shapiro. So one thing I want to say, it's quite clear he lost his temper. It's quite clear that he got angry, that he's losing his temper. It's 14 minutes in. They barely talked about his book. He's done nothing but defend himself from hit pieces, from stupid questions on what defend this thing you said in 2012. He's starting to get upset, obviously, and that's when he loses his temper and says like what's the point of this? Although then it kind of hurts him because he gets it. Like, for one, you don't lose your temper during an interview. I'm sorry, that's not it. Like, in terms of just pure pragmatism, no matter how justified it is, you shouldn't lose your temper during an interview because it makes you look bad. It makes you think you can't handle the questions. And any person that it's like if you've ever seen someone start asking questions and then they fall apart and then the person's like, well, like they start getting upset or they start getting offended or they, like, you can say it makes them look pretty bad. Like, if you've ever seen anyone say, like, ask questions that you agree with and the person that you disagree with starts getting all flustered, like, it makes them look bad. So when it comes to Ben Shapiro, him getting angry during an interview is not a good thing. It's justified. I honestly believe it's just, like, I can't blame him for doing that. 14 and a half minutes in an interview, they've barely mentioned his book, which is the whole reason they're there to talk about. This, like, he's been getting fed, like, loaded questions this whole time. They haven't talked about his book. They're just going on and on about, like, what's this thing you said in 2012? Defend that now. Like, aren't you a hypocrite? Like, pretty much every question. And again, if you want to watch the full interview to see all the questions, link in the description. Pretty much every question so far has been, aren't you a hypocrite? And he's obviously getting angry, and I can't blame him for that. It's just, like, there's two different parts to this. Can I blame him for getting upset? No. Does it make him look bad? Yes. I think you can hold those two positions at the same time because they're on two different issues. Now we're going to jump to the very end, 14 minutes and 45 seconds, where he finally gets up and says, I'm done. And I don't really have much to say about it. I'm just going to play it just so you can see what happened.
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time.
All
sir.
right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse. Now, Mr. Shapiro, we'll say goodbye.
So I think that was actually a good kind of jab he got in. Andrew Neil got in at the end to say, like, well, thank you for proving that anger is not part of American politics, when Ben Shapiro storms off angry. It makes him look bad. I'm just going to say that much. It made him look bad that he didn't finish the interview. It would have been in his best interest to just sit there and deal with it for I don't know if it's supposed to go on for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour. I'm not sure. But I think it would have been in his best interest to just continue the interview. And I have heard people say, like, apparently Ben Shapiro said, yeah, later on he regrets how he acted. I'm not sure exactly what he means by that. If he means how he responded, how he walked out, I'm not sure. But I think, I don't think it's a stretch to say it did not make him look good. I think to the average person that make him look good. And you have to remember that Ben Shapiro is not doing this interview to appeal to his audience. Like that's what his podcast is for. That's if he wanted to appeal to his audience, he could just put out another podcast episode, and that's it. But the thing is, he's doing an interview with the BBC, and the BBC have an audience that is separate from his for the most part, and he's reaching out to them. So, for the sake of keeping this video below 20 minutes, I'm going to end it here. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more. Hitting the subscribe button really helps me out. Hitting the like button helps me out. It just gets the video out there and shows YouTube that there's feedback. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I do want to know. And thanks for watching.